Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Novel at Home. I'll give everyone a chance to get in and get situated. I was just telling one of our authors, today marks the 6-month anniversary of the first event we had to cancel for the pandemic. So thank you to all of our authors and publishers and customers, readers who have pivoted with us to these, increasingly normal, I guess, the new normal virtual events. I don't know when we'll see another in-store event, but we're so glad everybody has adopted this new format and adapted with us, and we'll keep doing this as long as everyone will let us. The way our event will work tonight is I'll give a brief intro, then hide myself so their authors can have a wonderful conversation. And if you want to take a look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see there is a chat box. And if you want to reserve that for any just comments, shout outs, things like that. But if you have a question, you'll notice there's a Q&A tab. And you can click on the Q&A tab and enter a question. And after our author's conversation, I will pop up at the end and ask any questions that we have time for from you guys. So give it another second or two for folks to get in the room. As always, we have copies of the author's books at novelmemphis.com, or also there's a big display in the front of the store. That's one thing that authors not touring don't get to see, their book displays and signage and all of that, but it is right as soon as you walk in the door. There's plenty of copies to grab. But yeah, we are so honored to have two brilliant authors, poets, essayists tonight. We have Aimee Nezhukumatathil and J. Lanham, and a little bit about Drew. He's from South Carolina, and he's a birder, naturalist, essayist, poet. He's had his work published in all sorts of publications. He has won all sorts of awards, including the Southern Book Prize, which if any of you attend our Reader Meet Writer series that we do with the Southern Independent Booksellers Alliance, that is the annual award that booksellers and customers from all over the South vote on. So he, I believe it's the 2017 winner of that. And he is the author of The Home Place, Memoirs of a Colored Man's Love Affair with Nature, which again is for sale at Novel. And we are here to celebrate the launch of World of Wonders, in praise of fireflies, whale sharks, and other astonishments. And the author, Aimee Nezhukumatathil, is a poet and author as well. She is also currently professor of English and Creative Writing in the University of University of Mississippi's MFA program. She's also an award winner, Pushcart Prize. She's a recipient of a Mississippi Arts Council grant. She was named 2020 Guggenheim Fellow in Poetry, no big deal. And she was just announced as one of 6 finalists for the Kirkus Prize in Nonfiction for 2020. That's a super big deal. We are so excited and have our fingers crossed. I was mentioning to Drew when we were getting ready for this that I didn't know, I was at a trade show. Winter Institute is our big bookseller conference of the year. And you really only have a few minutes of these giant rooms full of advanced copies of books. And you get about, 5-10 minutes in between sessions to go take a look and select, what you want to read and throw it in your tote bag for later. And I try not to travel with too many books anymore. But this book, this advanced copy caught my eye. Gorgeous cover illustrations. And of course, there's just the tiniest bit of a blurb from K.S.A. Lanham, who I trust implicitly for all reading suggestions. It says, "This book is about to shake the earth." And indeed it is, and we're doing whatever we can to do continue that in our strange pandemic ways. But I'll let you guys take it away. Aimee and Drew, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Drew, I'm so grateful. I just wanted to start off and say how grateful I am. I know this is your low teaching time, and I know how much Zoom can just take up, just drain you too. So I just feel so humbled and grateful. And it's always fun. It doesn't feel like work to chat with you. So
it's great to be here, Aimee. And I will tell you, we had a conversation on another call a few
yes.
years back, and I wanted more. And so we get to sit tonight and talk about your wonderful book, which, by the way, Aimee, I both read and listened to.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh my
so,
goodness.
But it's great to be here with you. So this is not work.
Oh, good. Thank you.
This is soul food. So I'm good.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
So how are you?
I'm doing okay. This hour is okay. I think I mentioned this was going to be like my fun thing, but at the end of the day, lots of busy work and, but I'm so super glad to be home. My whole family, all my loved ones are safe. We're all indoors, and that's not ideal, but we try to get out a couple times a week and go bird watching. We have this beautiful lake nearby, and it's so great to release my boys out with no mask. And, you don't realize, or I didn't realize, I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old, and there's something so sad having them be masked up all the time, or not be, normally they'd be climbing trees. I'd have to be telling them, get down from there, get down. And they're subdued. So I can't, but it's nice to be able to be near such a beautiful lake, like Sardis Lake, and let them just be feral for a moment. And
yeah.
And so we have a big pelican group that keeps coming by right now, white pelicans.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, and I'm not used to the white pelicans with their kind of goofy bump on their nose. I'm used to the brown pelicans of Florida. Anyway, so it's been nice, but it's heartbreaking to, no 13-year-old boy, 10-year-old boy should be indoors all the time,
Yeah, it's I don't know, we talk about what normal is, and I've almost taken that out of my vocabulary or even thinking about it. Of course, there's some normal that we don't want to return to, but as a writer and a poet, sometimes the pen or the keyboard, I guess, feels heavy. But you've, Aimee, you've done such an amazing job on this book.
Oh, thank you.
That this is a lift.
Oh, good, really?
It's a lift that does not dodge. You bring up, you wind in all of these colors. There's, the first thing that I wrote when I was writing my little notes, I said, clearly a woman of color. And I meant that in many ways, because you proudly bring forth who you are, who your family is, who everyone is, but also sometimes how that grinds. But it's all within the context of this beautiful botany and bestiary. And so congratulations on this. It's truly a work of art.
Thank you so much. I mean, that means so much because I've taught home place. I've, literally used your sentences as models for my students on how to write about the outdoors and family. So to hear this from you is just like mind blowing. My environmental literature and my nature writing students know that there's no syllabus without you on it from me. So thank you so much. I'm primarily known as a poet, so to even write out a sentence and to make it make an essay more than 3 pages, I just felt like I was running a 5K or really a marathon, honestly. So yeah, thank you.
Well, there's something very pleasing about it, though. I was telling Nicole beforehand that one of the the things that I'm able to do is to pick it up and to open it wherever, caught up, and not have to, there's this thread, but then everything is so beautifully, discreetly packaged within each of these essays. So I have my favorites, but then I can't get out of my head your cephalopod year.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I
You
thought
know?
I thought one of yours would be one of my bird ones for sure.
Well, yeah, there's this line in the cassowary chapter. So I know you're going to share a reading with us at some point.
Yeah.
I think you had maybe a few slides that you wanted to show us as well.
Yeah, would you like me to do that now or in a little bit?
Whenever you're ready, we can do that and then we can keep going.
Okay, great. Let me see. I'm gonna share my screen a little bit. First, I want to do a small little 40-second video.
Okay.
And that is, these guys real well here from the Cornell lab. Can you see that, Drew?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Good.
This is on one of the chapters in my book is called The Superb Bird of Paradise. And we have an amazing illustrator, Fumi Nakamura. I'll show you her illustrations in a little bit. But it's the mating dance of this bird that is just, it's my son's favorite. They would beg me when they were little, play this, and I was really strict with them on TV time or screen time. But one thing I didn't feel guilty about is when they wanted to watch bird videos, I would use that, clean up your room and then you get to watch this. So this was their little treat if they put their toys back when they were little. All right, here's about 40 seconds.
This is the male superb bird of paradise. And while he might not look all that superb at first glance, he's capable of one of the most jaw-dropping transformations, which is unrivaled even among the other shape-shifting birds of paradise. People who've seen this display have called it everything from a space alien to my personal favorite, a psychedelic smiley face. How do we get here? How does he go from something otherwise bird-like into something so unusual and extremely different? In order to better understand what's going on, we need to become more familiar with the basic parts of this bird.
All right,
wow.
On, but it was just that hopping up and down and the jet blackness of this bird was one of my son's favorite, and this became one of my favorites as well. But let me see, I have one more thing, another screen share here. So just to give you a taste of what some of these illustrations look like, because I would be remiss, one of the things that have been the wonderful feedback and the wonderful reception has been, yes, about the essays, but have been telling me about these the illustrations here. And just to give you a taste, it was really important for me to find an Asian American illustrator who could capture that sense of getting things anatomically correct, but also just having, let me skip that, a little bit of whimsy as well. So here's the Potu. And then, and with his giant kind of yellow eyes, here's the cassowary that Drew had talked about with the double wattle. And then here's the superb bird of paradise, right before it goes into the full-on mating dance. And I just loved how you can see in each one of these the illustrations, the eye is just so haunting. And yet there's maybe 3% whimsy, and everything else is really just as accurate as could be, And so I'm just so thrilled to be able to work with an illustrator, and Milkweed didn't balk at all when I said, I have this wacky idea for illustrations. I think a lot of publishers were like, I don't know what you're talking about. We don't do this in nature writing. And I was like, I really just wanted to kind of capture that sense of Looking at old children's books and old textbooks that I used to love, and library books, reading on the floor of my library. Growing up, they would always have these one spot color illustrations. So like one color for the entire illustration. And what I loved about that is that I had to fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
There was maybe they would use the color red and then nothing else. So I'd have to imagine, okay, that's green grass. I'm assuming that's a blue sky, So I just love that kind of retro look, but it still feels so fresh and contemporary in 2020. So
Well,
yes, a little
it's beautiful. And this color thing, Aimee,
bit.
I remember you mentioning your friends that always had the box of 64.
Yes.
And I never had the one box of 64 that I had. I forgot and left it in my parents' car, and it melted.
Oh, no.
So, but I would like to know the way that you describe colors, the way that you're way beyond 24, Aimee. Let me tell you. It's like a box of 762 or something, because the book is so vibrant, but at the same time, it never loses its brownness.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. I just want to keep that on all of my books. That's like all I need to have is just that little statement right there. I love it. Thank you. Thank you. And keeping that brownness, as you can imagine, was so important to me. Having never seen, I think you've heard me say this a billion times, but in all of those books that I loved and devoured as a kid, I never saw any Asian Americans in them. And not just in books, but in TV, movies. I was a kid during the whole early days of MTV. I just never saw Asian Americans. And if I did, they were, very stereotypical, or I mean, it just became a joke, like
Yeah.
An Asian computer guy would have a gong sounding every time he talked, or something like that. And
Yeah.
it just became a punchline. And so I was like, where are the people with dignity, with smarts, with a little bit of humor, the qualities that my parents have, the qualities that my relatives had, and that me and my sister hopefully have, and just never saw anything like that. So I think that was huge to me. Without, I didn't want to also beat people over the head with it.
Sure.
But I also did not want to ignore that part as well.
Well, it's very strong writing. It's no, you didn't beat anyone over the head, but it was, when you bring up these, it's never pleasant to talk about prejudice and bias, racism, misogyny, and I noticed in one chapter, in the flamingo chapter, there is no illustration.
Yeah.
Was that purposeful for the missing, or?
It was, in hindsight, I didn't, I never set out to say, I'm going to do this to this effect, but I was very purposeful in choosing which ones I wanted illustrated and which ones not. So I tried to do a nice even array, and a nice number of animals and plants that maybe the average person wouldn't be familiar with, but also I wanted to have about half that people would be. So I included the monarch butterfly,
Yes.
most everybody would know that. So I wanted it to feel like, oh, this isn't just some exotic world because this is a world traveler and I can never appreciate this. I want people to say, like, these things are right there in front of you, if you take time to listen, to be quiet, to be still, So the flamingo just happened to know. If I could choose maybe 5 more, I would have definitely included the flamingo for sure. I was a flamingo in 6th grade for Halloween. So I have a very keen place in my heart for the flamingo.
So it's the birds obviously appeal to me, and I started developing a list, but then there were certain things that you brought up, the axolotl smile, for example. And as you talked about the smile through different sorts of incidents, including, encounters with peers and those kinds of things. And that was very powerful. And again, this sort of the litanies that you would have, but also sort of this declarative repetition. So with the cassowary, I love the boom. You could feel that.
Oh,
Really.
good. Yeah,
could-
Don't give it away. Don't give it away, because that's the end of my book.
Okay. No, I won't give away that part. But
Okay.
yeah, it's so when I think about process, how different is this process of writing, of prose writing here, lyrical prose? How is it different than your routine as a poet? Or
Yeah, that's such a good question. I had my graduate degree is in both, actually, creative nonfiction and poetry. I just had earlier success with poetry,
Mhm.
So I do love the sentence. I love developing a scene. But something happened to me. It was very palpable with the 2016 election. I could not figure out how to write line breaks anymore. I didn't want to deal with line breaks. I felt like it was a tyranny to even have to think about a line break. I wanted my words to go from margin to margin. I began to think of line breaks as this tyranny of line breaks, So I could breathe, let's put it this way, I could breathe in both genres, poetry and nonfiction, but I could fully exhale and fully clean, empty my lungs with nonfiction. And it still is not that long. My husband is a writer as well. He writes essays. And I always joke with him, I think the longest essay in there is about 5 pages. To me, that was like, again, a marathon. But it just felt so good to not have to worry about a line break or stanza breaks or any kind of white space. I could just finish what I needed to say. So for me, it wasn't trying to compact things like in a chicken bouillon cube, for my poems, where I feel like the language, the imagery is much more compressed and condensed, super concentrated. My essays hopefully are still flavorful, to use that metaphor, but it's like you take one of those chicken bouillon cubes and you drop it in a pot of boiling water. So I'm hoping that it's still flavorful. You still get the elements of poetry in there, but you can, it's more digestible. I don't know where I'm going with this metaphor, but yeah, that's how I look at it, as that I love both genres, but for these, because I wanted to convey my exuberance, my worries, my fears, and some kind of sad, lonesome memories. I needed that bigger space to unfurl, to kind of really unfurl. Yeah.
Well, to carry your metaphor one step further, you drop the bouillon cubes in the broth. So it's flavor in between your lines.
Oh, great.
So it's all good. The other thing that I love, and you're a world traveler. You've lived in all these places, New York, Arizona, Kansas, Wisconsin, Mississippi. And one of the things that you do, and as fellow Southerners, we recognize the issues here, but I think the nation realizes its issues all over the place.
Yeah.
One of the other things that you do, along with bringing your brownness forward, is that in the new chapter, you talk about finding your pond, and that now you're in your pond.
Yeah. And I think, if you would have asked me this, let's say 5 years ago, that my pond would be Mississippi, I think I would have laughed you out of town. And nothing against Mississippi. I blame my education, my education for, and, I blame pop culture for, Mississippi is not depicted well. And many times it is very well justified, but I think there's a fuller picture that could be had about this state, and it's very complex than it's usually given credit to. I know in New York, I lived in Western New York, and one of the things I love kind of just trying to repeat to my friends from Western New York, who constantly, at least when I first moved here, they were saying, be careful, be careful. I want to tell them, hon, I feel safer here than I ever did in Western New York, where I was always looking over my shoulder, and, and By all means, I know Mississippi has a long way to go. It is not perfect by any means. But it is also the only place, all those places that you named, where nobody asks me what I am, you know, and there's something very dehumanizing when you're in the grocery store, no matter how good the intent, if I'm selecting, you know, some bananas or something, and I get a tap, tap, tap on my shoulder, and then somebody says, excuse me, my husband and I had a bet. Are you Portuguese? And just, you know, just some stranger, you know, it's here, I think,
Wow.
oh, I've relaxed. I'm not on anytime. You know, you and I are both professors and we both give talks. So it's like we know when we are kind of anonymous a little bit, you know.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then to get othered in that way where I can't go to the grocery store, or I can't go to the post office. You know, I had someone, I was in Ohio. Someone asked me if I was Aztec. And you know, the smart aleck in me wanted to say, like, yes, you're right, the last living Aztec survivor is here waiting tables in Columbus, Ohio. You know, you got me, you know. And I know it comes out of a place of curiosity, but when you have 45 years of that being othered, and you get to a place like Mississippi where you think, oh, this is going to be a dangerous, scary place. And it's just been a place where I think because people have these conversations, these hard conversations about race, and they know them early on, either they they just have better Southern manners or what, but they don't feel the need to ask you that first thing, you know.
Yeah.
When I first moved here, my youngest was in 2nd grade. Their field trip was to oh my gosh, why am I blanking on it now? Oh, the Lorraine Hotel. They're in Memphis, here in Memphis. So I thought, oh, well, this is going to be a nice 2nd grade version of the events of the assassination of Martin Luther King. You know, they did not hold back, Drew. And it was, you know, they brought all these 2nd graders out to the balcony of the Lorraine Hotel, and they, you know, they pointed across the street and said, that is where the man who shot Martin Luther King stood. He was hiding across the street and shot him in the head and chest, you know. And I was just stunned, and you know, I was like, wait a minute, you didn't give us any warning. And yet at the same time, I was kind of grateful because they did it in a very kind of matter-of-fact way, but they also are teaching the kids from such a young age, look at what a terrible, evil thing this is. They're not tiptoeing around it with this false, hey, I'm woke, we're all liberal here. And yet those same so-called woke liberal people are the first ones to ask me if I'm Aztec while I'm in the grocery store or something, you know? So it's complex here in the South. It's, you know, I think we've done events in the summer where, you know, I was talking about, there's a protest for the Confederate monuments going on right now. Since I last talked to you, they've moved the Confederate statue from campus now. So that's kind of a nice bonus.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still technically on campus, but at least they put it to a graveyard, like an actual proper, not in the center welcoming beacon of light and, you know, in the middle of campus. And it's kind of a bummer now that I'm teaching online. It's one of the reasons I wish I was in person, because I would have to walk past that thing. And now I wish I could be on campus, because I would do a little dance, you know, it's gone. So it's small steps. We're changing the flag here. I mean, I know it looks like molasses to the rest of the union, but it is changing. It is changing. And that's something that I think a lot of people outside of this area don't give credit for at all.
Well, Mississippi should be very proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
Because it as a fellow Southerner, and what happens with South Carolinians, South Carolina and Mississippi are often sort of side by side in narratives of the rest of the country.
Yeah.
But one of the things that, again, I love about this book is that there are a few books that have given me sort of this validation, sort of permission to really out, you know, and be who I am as a Black man, and a rural Black man, a Southerner, a birder, all these things. And your book does that for us.
Thank you.
And I know it's going to do it for young brown and Black women. It's just an important thing that people have not seen. My daughter is, our daughter is a 6th grade teacher, and this is one of the books that I'm going to recommend to her, because she's always looking for different ways and different resources for students to learn science.
Oh, that's so
And
great.
so this, I talk about field guides, FEEL guide, and that's what this is, in that sense. So if you don't mind, I told people, or earlier we talked about me listening to you.
Oh, yes.
And I love listening to writers read their own work. So if you have something that you could share with us.
Sure. This is, so I showed a video of the superb bird of paradise. I think I've never read from this chapter before, and it's one of my favorite ones, because it connects to my wedding to a white guy from Kansas, and this confluence of what it was like. This was the first out of all, I'm the eldest grandchild from my Indian grandparents, and the first non-arranged marriage in like, my parents got married justice of the peace, but and so it was just, imagine small town Western New York and all these saris. I mean, it was like they reminded me of birds, just of different colors, turquoise, emeralds, and yellows and golds. I think my former hometown didn't know what was going on. There weren't many saris on the town square. Anyway, and then, my mother's side is from the Philippines, and the formal dress there is something called the barong Tagalog, which is like a transparent shirt made of pineapple fibers. So there was a lot of what that town would call strange, unusual clothing, not really seen in the middle of the day. And it was a slow news day. My wedding made the front page of the paper and there was nothing else going on, basically. So, all right, this is the superb bird of paradise. I'll just read a little bit.
Awesome.
On the day of my wedding, the town square of my sleepy little village in Western New York burbled over with a small sea of saris. The town had never seen that many saris and barong Tagalogs, the men's formal wear of the Philippines, hand-loomed from pineapple fibers, all gathered together before, and our wedding made the front page of the paper. Someone gave us a barong Tagalog as a wedding present, sized for a tween. Well, what if we don't have a child? I sighed to my husband as we opened gifts. What if we don't have a son? The saris came in every shade. Reds, violets, liquid onyx, and especially teal and turquoise, the colors of our wedding. What a dance party we had at the reception, with these sari colors flashing in the DJ's portable light show. Which is why I was reminded of the Lophorina superba, not the lesser or the greater, but the superb bird of paradise, as I looked out on the dance floor. The superb is a bird of many colors. Its beak is like the blackest black night in January when you're trying to write a letter on black construction paper with a black swan feather dipped in India ink. It's pretty black. When the superb hoists up its long black nape feathers, it looks like it's swooshing an elliptical cape around its neck. It's one of the showiest displays in the entire animal kingdom. Iridescent blue feathers on the superb's head flash extra blue as they catch the sun, little eyes against the black oval of its nape. This colorful bird dances along at about 8 inches tall and lives in New Guinea. It eats mostly fruits and berries, but has been known to nosh on the occasional small lizard. The superb bird of paradise leads a pretty solitary life, except during mating season. Perhaps my favorite detail about these birds is that the male actually clears a dance floor before he gets his groove on, laying down leaves or scraps of paper to mark the boundaries. Then comes the courtship dance. The bird spreads his black tail feathers in a fan, and he starts to jump and bounce before the female with that wide horizontal turquoise stripe while that wide horizontal turquoise stripe blazes into the shape of a cartoon mouth, the only color emblazoned on those dark feathers.
Mm.
Now, we had only 3 songs on the do not play list for our wedding. Strokin', the chicken dance, and Macarena. When we were on the party bus on the way to our reception, my new husband received a text from our DJ saying he'd come down with a case of the shingles, but not to worry, he was sending a great replacement and would even knock $100 off our bill. Unsurprisingly, the dance floor cleared after the playing of 4 or 5 songs that nobody recognized. People were still smiling, drinking, and chatting, but nobody was dancing. Frantic, I scream whispered to my husband with my tightest, brightest smile, "Tell him to play any upbeat song from 2005. Too late. I recognized those rumba notes at once. But then something extraordinary happened. Not only did everyone take to the floor when Macarena blasted over the speakers, but because of its interactive nature, everyone was dancing with each other. My husband's cousin from Western Kansas was facing my second uncle from India with outstretched hands. A distant cousin was shaking her hips, wrapped in a pink sari, at one of my best friends from high school. My husband's grandparents popped their hands behind their heads alongside my dear Filipino friends from New York City, Joseph and Sarah. How did everybody know this dance? I'll stop there.
That's amazing. And now, so Macarena's been in my head.
I'm sorry, it's the worst earworm ever, but it was such a joyful moment, you know, very unexpected, but a joyful moment at our wedding.
So, you know, one of the, I don't know, for me as a writer and as I'm trying to describe birds and sort of write these scenes to birds, this is going to sound odd, but I've never had a more colorful description of black.
Oh, that's great.
So how does that, where does that come from? I mean, now you mentioned this incident when you had drawn a peacock.
Yeah.
And your teacher refused that, and then you drew a bald eagle, right?
Yes. So regressive. I think that was the beginnings of being passive aggressive or something, you know, like, oh, you don't think the peacock's American enough? Let me draw a bald eagle. I talk about this in the book. I'm going to draw a bald eagle, and then I'm going to put an American flag on there just for safe, just for to be extra, you know? Yeah, you know, I mean, I think it was all my life I've had to be explaining something about myself, my parents in particular, even the phrase people of color. Well, you and I know that there's so many gradations there, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I mentioned too that Mississippi is a complex place. Well, it's even more complex for my Black friends, you know, and I'm very well aware, and I talk about this in the book, that the outdoors is not a place of comfort for many people. A lot of my Black friends do not feel comfortable at all. And that's something I did not want to ignore. And I wanted to recognize the privilege of having a childhood where I did feel like the outdoors was safe for me, because nobody, at least like the catalpa trees, were not asking me, what am I, you know? But I think it's because I've had to be explained since as long as I can remember. What are you? What is your dad? Is your mom Chinese? What is that accent? You know, and just, I don't know, just always being othered when I least expect it. And then I think, I'm not a psychologist at all. My mom is a retired psychiatrist, so she might know. I think one of the best things that my parents did is they didn't give me that elusive box of 64 crayons. So I always grew up coveting that, appreciating it so much. And now I still love school supplies. I'm a full professor and I still love school supplies and I appreciate them so much. I had just off-brand, they were like a couple steps up from candles, for crayons.
Yep.
And, but they also worked like 80-hour weeks, 70-hour weeks in the medical fields, but they always took time to either take me outside, or if they couldn't take me outside, like on hikes up in the mountains or something like that, or just even spend time with me in their garden, they would take me to the library. So in some ways I did feel moments of being alone, but I didn't, because I had books and I had the outdoors. And how could you be lonesome watching a bunch of turtles frolic, slow motion frolic, things like that. How could you be lonesome when you could identify, when my dad helped train me at the age of 8, being able to identify almost every star in the sky. You could never be lonesome if you were moved from these rural places, Western Kansas, Iowa, all that. It was only other humans that would make me feel othered and lonesome.
Yeah.
But never the next.
Was there, what was the hardest chapter, the hardest essay to write?
Oh, definitely. I think the vampire squid, that cephalopod year.
Yes.
I'm a former high school football mascot. I'm an extrovert mostly, and I'm known for kind of almost ridiculous, over the top, joyous teaching. So to even admit to anybody that, and in the big scheme of things, it was a 1 year, which is really nothing. There was no permanent trauma endured, anything like that. But it did change me so much to go from a place where I always had never trouble making friends, except for that year in the middle of high school. And it was hard for me to, I was very well aware that many memoirs have a major traumatic event happening. This one doesn't. And I don't ever want to equate any of my experiences with something like a death or a divorce or anything like that. But I also wanted, what I didn't see out there was the narrative of a girl who loved the outdoors, who felt comfort in the outdoors, and who felt alone sometimes in the sea of white people. And I knew I had to write it because that's the kind of book that I was looking for when I was in high school, and I never found it. So again, I'm not trying to be melodramatic by any means, but it's hard to admit that I went from being class president to eating lunch in a toilet stall, not because anyone was necessarily making fun of me, because literally it felt like nobody could see me. Nobody talked to me. Just literally nobody talked to me. So it was such a feeling of being invisible, and it's hard. My boys read that and they're like, "Mommy, did this happen or did you make this up?" And I was, because they literally cannot wrap their minds around that their gregarious, goofy mom ever had that moment, and that's why I wanted to include it, because I wanted to show that you never know the full story of anybody's life, and I wanted to show white people in particular how difficult it was to grow up sometimes in the 70s and 80s and just be stared at or ignored. There was no kind of, and I didn't see a whole lot of those books growing up. Yeah, but I didn't want to end there on sadness, and I hope my readers find that it ends on hope and such great love for this planet and great love for the inhabitants of this planet. But I also wanted to be true that this is not like I came out of the womb and just started, loving everything, and, everything just brings me joy and delight and wonderment. And especially now in 2020, I want to also say that it's work to feel like you have wonder. It is a practice. There are days where, I cringe to even open my laptop. What news is going to be today, how am I going to talk about wonder to my students today? How am I going to teach them to write about beauty and joy when all I want to do is throw a blanket over my head? You know, it is definitely a practice, and it's not something that comes, let's just say that there are days where it does not come easy at all. And I think it's also important to say that.
Well, it's Amy, it's beautiful. And it's funny you mentioned being seen. I had just, I don't know, just sort of, I had written themes, right?
Mm.
And 2 on my list. Well, I had safety. Number 2 was being seen.
Mm.
3 was sentience. 4 was love. 5, acceptance. And 6, difference. And diversity along with that. So it's there is so much packaged here and so much depth. There's nothing like it. You know, there's certainly nothing like it on my shelf. And so I'm super appreciative of you sharing your life in a different life really than most people. You said othering, and you used that word othering.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the comfort that that I take in it. But I hope as people read it and as they read about the vampire squid,
yeah,
I hope they also feel, I hope white people feel a little discomfort in it. And understanding sort of what that's like. They can never be in those shoes, but you do a great job as a writer in giving an opportunity to feel it. So thank you.
Thanks. That's so wonderful. It's just such a pleasure to chat with someone who's done their homework and who gets it. I don't have to explain anything. And like I said, I mean, I literally teach your sentences on how to make people feel and how to make landscape come alive. So this is such an honor to chat with you, and so super fun. You know, this is still new. This has only been out for just not even a week. And
Yeah.
so even hearing, I'm still processing it too. You know, you work on this book, but when you hear the kind of like the themes, you know, I didn't really think about that when I was composing stuff. I just needed to compose it, and then that stuff comes later. So this is so super helpful because this is brand spanking new, and like you said, there was nothing else like it. You know, when editors ask, oh, what are the comparable books? I had a hard time because I just didn't, you know, I mean, I have so many wonderful writers that I love and adore, but I had to kind of piecemeal my comparable books, you know, that kind of thing. I didn't know what else to say except like, there truly isn't anything like it, but please take a chance on me. And Milkweed is just, they've been so incredible. I've been so lucky to work with them, as you know. Yeah, so.
They because, well, Amy, that's one of the things that I think, that's a question that I, especially for writers of color, for us, in that we're constantly breaking molds. I hate for anyone to say, well, you should be like, why can't they be like us? And so this chance that Milkweed takes, I think it's an important risk, and I think for these conversations to go forward in the way that they go forward in Mississippi or South Carolina, or the way that we hear them, is that publishers have to take these risks. And you're not a risk. I mean, you're a proven commodity, but here's proof in the pudding. So the thing that I'm sad about is that I don't have this signed yet. So I'm gonna have to get it. I'm gonna have to get it signed at some point.
I know.
I think, I'm not sure where we are, Nicole, with question and answer, if we're there yet, but
yeah, I've just got a few questions from the audience, and have a few comments. We've got Rosemary Martin Jones, just says, hi, Drew and Amy, glad to be listening to this conversation. And we've got Elijah Edwards, who says, I just wanted to share a note of deep gratitude for both panelists. Your works and conversations create an ecology of hope. Thank you for being superb writers who nourish with color. Much joy from a student of color in Virginia Beach.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
if that doesn't make
Oh,
you tear
wow.
up.
That is
Wow. Thank you.
And yeah, to shift gears to the very important question from Edwin. Aimee, do your children have the 64 count box of crayons with the sharpener?
They do. They do. They probably had them a little earlier than they needed to have them, but I could not wait to do that. But you know what? I should say this because they're around here. I don't know if they nearly appreciate them as much as I would have, you know, because they had gotten them so early, and you know, they both have like, they have a whole cabinet of art supplies that I could only have dreamed of or only had access to at school, you know. So that makes them sound like they're not appreciative, but let's just say
It was a different time,
Yes.
right? The 64 count box was like a status symbol that you drooled over. I remember seeing friends open them at their birthday parties, and you know, yeah, that was a big deal.
It was so like, and you can just picture 6-year-old me just staring longing at this box. So
Totally.
it all came out in this book, you know. I love that Drew said that he lost track of the colors that are mentioned. I was making, you know, that's I think a direct result, Drew, that is so apt, that I think that's a direct result for me not having Crayola when I was
I can smell that box of crayons. I'm just telling you.
Yeah, you really can.
Yes.
Crayons.
Yeah.
We've got another question from Shamim Graf. Is there a subject you wanted to write about but weren't able to include for one reason or another?
Oh yeah, you know, when I made my kind of wish list when I was kind of outlining this book, I had 200 plants and animals. So it was never, it could have been quadruple the length, but and even that, you know, really any given day there's a new animal. Oh, I should have done this one. Why didn't I include this? You know, right now hummingbirds are making their way out of Mississippi to make their giant haul across the Gulf of Mexico. So they're frenzying right now. We're going through sugar water like crazy. And I thought, dang it, why don't I just do the simple hummingbird? You know, and I didn't, you know, so there's over, maybe there'll be a part 2 or 3, you know, I don't know, but I really wanted how I made this to be, you know, 30, as I chose the 30 that I had an immediate, and I had an immediate, either personal story or immediate connection that I didn't feel was forced at all. That was my own litmus test. I didn't want to be like, oh, here's a hummingbird, and here's a time I dated a boy with a red scarf or something, you know what I mean? Like, it would just seem too forced and too fake. So yeah, so there was really 200 plants and animals, but it was hard, but I narrowed it down to 30.
This is a question from me, and I know, Drew, we talked just for a second about ability or inability to write and read during these times, but I'd love to hear from you both if you are working on anything writing wise right now, and if you're reading anything or any new books you're excited about, could be friends' works, anything, or have you been in a slump like me?
Go for it, Drew. I'm curious to hear.
Lots of essays. So we've all been talking about the heavy pen during these times, and Aimee mentioned opening the laptop sort of with caution for fear of I don't know, something coming out at you almost. And so Nicole, it's for me, it's important for people to understand sort of how story goes on even as we're stuck sort of in the midst of all this. So working on several essays, working on my next book, working on the expansion to Sparrow Indy. That's a lot of fun. So got the cover for that today, so that's always exciting.
Oh, wow.
So reading wise, sort of going back and retracking. I just read a friend's new novel. My friend John Lane has new novel out. Whose woods are these? So, and it's been hard to pick up a whole lot new. And again, World of Wonders, to be able to listen first and to hear Aimee's voice and her inflections, and then to read, it's been very important for me. And so I always encourage people, if you can get a book with an author reading his or her or their words, it's a critical thing. So I encourage people to listen to her read World of Wonders, as well as to have the hard copy. And I don't separate the two. I think you have both, because this is like a reference in ways, and I can pick it up, and there's something about having this book in my hand, but there's something about hearing her as well. So I'm just happy to be doing that and to have this opportunity to be here with her.
Oh, thank you so much, Drew. They when Milky was talking about the audiobook, they're like, well, we have a couple Asian American actors, and I was like, you know, I didn't want to ever pull a diva move or anything, and I said, but you know, I've been a professor and speaking in public all the time. Like, can I just at least try? And if it's a hot mess, then and I gave, you know, and I was in speech and debate, if I do say so myself, through college, high school. So thank you that. And when they heard it, they're like, yeah, never mind. I don't know what we were thinking. I want your voice. We need to have your voice. So they were fantastic. And because of the pandemic, we recorded it in my church, my Methodist church here in Oxford, and we have an incredible sound designer who knew all the technical aspects, made it sound like it was in a fancy schmancy studio. So thank you for that small little plug there, Drew. Thanks. Yeah.
And Aimee, what are you working on? Reading anything? Just working on your kids' school and teaching?
No, it's kind of all of the above. And thank goodness I have my husband who's helping me out here on that, monitoring 2 different virtual, you know, they have daily assignments, they have weekly assignments. Both of us are also teaching full time, you know, right now. So I've been reading a lot of my students' work, and it's one of the greatest joys and privileges, though, is teaching people how to make poems, you know, and what, you know, I was lamenting that I'm doing it virtually, because I would much rather be able to be in person and hear them in person. There's just something so beautiful about that. 12 people sitting around a table and waiting for that breakthrough stanza and seeing the look on everybody's faces when that shy boy who had never said anything just boom lands this metaphor that just shakes everybody. So we do that on Zoom. It's, you know, it's still a little bit early, but I think nothing will ever replace the in-person, that in-person magic of teaching people, this is how you make a metaphor. This is how you create tension in your writing. You know, I love that stuff. But yeah, I'm working on a couple different things. I'm actually working on a middle grade book for right now, and a couple more essays on beauty, brown beauty, and snakes all combined together. So I'm reading a lot of snakes. There's a lot of snakes in Mississippi, I've found, like a little more than I'm comfortable with. They're so fascinating. They're so fascinating. And so that's just my like fun. I don't know if I'll be writing, I should say, about snakes, but I'm reading about snakes, you know. I maybe shouldn't admit that. I feel like I should be always talking about novels and literature, but I'm still that same girl as for a good time. I'm still reading about the natural world, and I read more nature and science books than I ever do literature. So right now I'm reading.
Well, that ties in a little bit with, I think, our final question here. Jerome Kutleroff says, I thought you had a degree in zoology before I looked you up. Swimming with a whale shark is not an obvious experience in the life of a writer. How did you come to your knowledge of animals and plants?
That is like, oh my goodness, that is the greatest. I'm laughing my head off, because one of my fears, I keep telling my best friends, is like, all the scientists are going to come after me, that, you know, that, oh, I put too much metaphors here or I'm anthropomorphizing. So thank you so, so much. I am most definitely not a scientist. I could not light a Bunsen. I was supposed to be a chemistry major and I couldn't even make it through that because I could not light a Bunsen burner. I was terrified. I somehow made it to junior year in college, but my lab partners always had to do it for me. So that should have been a tip off right there. But I love reading science. I've always loved reading science since I was a little girl. And I think that vocabulary and the diction of the textbooks that describe things, I would get so lost and be making my own metaphors. So I'd forget, like, oh, there's a lecture going on in front of me, and then I'd be lost. So I just have read so much since I was little, and there's no, I mean, trust me, this book was quadruple fact checked to make sure that my memories of what I've read is not just I've weighed my poetic license around. It's all grounded in fact. So I was actually quite pleased to see that just there's maybe a couple of exceptions where I had to be corrected. But most of the other stuff, I have never actually chatted with my with one of my copy editors. I think she must I don't know what she thought to be like, what is happening? And I don't have some encyclopedia knowledge. I mean, I can't remember what I'm supposed to do tomorrow at 4, but I can remember The Secret Life of Ants book that I read in, my 11th grade year or something like that, so it's just a lot of reading and a lot of staring outside, lots of looking at rocks, just a lot of time to daydream too, and that knowledge of the outside world just impresses upon me more than anything, just from having that time of being outdoors, so thank you for the great compliment, but this was just from a lifetime of being a big nerd.
Well, we're grateful that you're a big nerd. We're big nerds just like you. And we're so grateful for you guys showing up to have this conversation. And we're equally thrilled to have your books at Novel for purchase and to help launch World of Wonders into the world. It's, again, a tough time to do that. I know book babies are usually launched with lots of fanfare and parties in person. And guys, the book, if you have not seen the finished copy in person, please at least come by the store, pick it up, I had to buy my own copy. I have an advanced copy, but this, I mean, Milkweed does such an amazing job. Fumi's illustrations, they're gorgeous. And the color, the sparse use of color throughout the book is just brilliant. So I hope we'll see everybody.
I say one thing, Nicole, it's just a small little detail, but I'm so proud of it. And Drew, I think you'd appreciate this. So when I was a grad student, I won't name names because I'm trying to be classy, but there was a former poet laureate who told me I need to change my last name or I'll never be published. And that stuck with me because, I wanted to follow advice. I wanted to, I don't usually ruffle against advice. So I was so devastated because I had promised my dad when I was a little girl, I'm never changing my name, that kind of thing. And I didn't obviously listen. But so when the folks at Milkweed, I said, is there any way, I love the cover so much. Is there any way we could just make my name? It's the first time I had a hardcover. I don't know if I'll ever have a hardcover. Is there some way we can make the name pop? And the brilliant art director, Mary Austin Speaker, said, how about some peacock teal shimmer foil? And that's what it's called, peacock teal shimmer foil.
Oh, that's perfect.
And so it's so ridiculously extra, but it is that perfect. Anyway,
so beautiful.
That's my little nod to my dad saying I'm never going to change this name for anything, and that's what I mean by Milkweed, seeing my vision and doing more than I could ever dream of.
That's amazing. Yeah, with a last name like Yasinski, I'm really grateful. There are others like that, and you feel a duty to, even though people spend your life tripping over it and all of that, and you hear every version of it and spelling of it. Yeah, I think it's important to put it out there and let people know that, yeah, it's on them to learn that name. You can do it. It's not that hard.
For all the Indian boys and girls out there who get made fun of for their last name. So I
Absolutely.
put shimmer foil just for you.
Love it. Oh, that's perfect. Well, thank you both so much for being here. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. We hope we'll see you at the store and on future events. Check out novelmemphis.com to buy the books and also to take a look at our upcoming events. Thank you guys. Have a good night.
Drew, you're the best. Thank you. Bye.
Love you, Aimee. Take care, everybody.
See you.